If you ever read the Gospels horizontally, where you compare each resurrection account, there seems to be a lot of contradictions, and it's not just an eyewitness.
What would those
problem.
contradictions?
Is there any contradiction in the Bible? And if there is, can it be reconciled? Well, many atheists and agnostics have pointed out some scriptures, and to be honest, when you first look at it, it appears there's a contradiction. But when you do a deeper study, you will quickly learn these aren't contradictions, they're just different perspective. Let me give you an example. Let's say you and your friends witnessed a car accident, and the police came and asked you to give a statement. One of you can say, I witnessed the driver going very fast, while the other friend says the color, the model, and the injury he witnessed during this accident. Same story, different detail, different perspective. It is the same with the gospel. But let's hear what she have to say. Take a look.
No, but I want to talk about the Gospels.
What's your name?
Rachel.
Hey, Rachel.
They're not necessarily eyewitness accounts. They're written in the third person, and the reason why we have the names Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is thanks to the Catholics putting those labels on there. So I guess I don't understand why you say they are eyewitness accounts.
Why do I think they're eyewitness accounts?
Right.
Because they contain eyewitness data. Like, for example, the Gospel of John, there are 59 eyewitness details in that document called the Gospel of John that could only have been known by an eyewitness or somebody who knew an eyewitness.
Okay, is it possible that someone could have just been writing a story?
Well, then you'd have to discount all the other evidence that doesn't appear to be a story. It appears to be a historical account.
From the Bible, right? The Bible is writing about, like, Mark is the first gospel that was written. And
probably. Some think Matthew may have been written first. Most scholars say Mark was written first.
Okay, so we'll go with the general consensus, I guess. And then they say maybe Matthew and Luke used a lot of Mark. That's why there's a lot of coinciding events. And if you ever read the Gospels horizontally, where you compare each resurrection account, there seems to be a lot of contradictions, and it's not just an eyewitness.
What would those
problem.
contradictions?
Well, for example, I think in Mark, the ladies go to the tomb, and Jesus isn't there, and an angel tells them to go tell the people, but they don't. It just ends, and then something else is added on about snakes. And then Matthew, he goes ballistic and says there's angels and earthquakes and everything at the resurrection. And they tell her to go tell them to go tell the disciples, and they do this time. Luke reins it in a little bit, and he says the stone was already rolled away, and their angel is sitting on the tomb. Or I don't have this exactly correct, but it's the gist. And then John, being the beloved disciple, made himself, or whoever wrote it, made himself get there first before Peter. And I don't know, there's just a lot of contradictions.
How are those?
These are not contradictions. These are just different perspectives of the same story. I have a video for you guys to see that perfectly explain this. Take a look at this video.
Supposed Bible contradiction. How many angels or men were at the tomb? Skeptics will note there are inconsistencies with what happened on Sunday morning when Jesus rose from the dead. Specifically, with regards to who was at the tomb to announce that Jesus had risen. Mark says it was a man, Matthew says it was an angel, Luke says there were 2 men, and John says there were 2 angels. Now, despite this appearing as an inconsistency on the surface, if we study the details more, we will find this hardly qualifies as a contradiction. First, the fact that Matthew and Mark only mention 1 being there instead of 2 doesn't mean there was a contradiction. In the ancient world, authors often employed a literary device called spotlighting. Mike Lacona defines this as when an author focuses attention on a person so that the person's involvement in a scene is clearly described, whereas mention of others who were likewise involved is neglected. The author has shined his literary spotlight on that person. So Matthew and Mark are probably just spotlighting the angel that spoke and didn't find it necessary in their ancient cultural context to mention there was another one with him. There is no rule that the Gospel authors had to mention literally everyone involved in every incident they report. Matthew and Mark probably only felt it necessary to mention the angel that spoke to get the story across. With regards to two Gospel authors saying they were men and the other two saying they were angels, this is hardly an issue. Luke, for example, does refer to them as men, but later in the very same chapter, he also says they were angels. Mark describes the man as in a white robe delivering divine revelation. Throughout the New Testament and in other Jewish works, angelic and divine beings are often described as being in white and appearing at random to deliver divine revelation. They can also be described as appearing as men. So it is hardly a problem to suggest Mark is claiming an angel spoke to the women who appeared as a man in a white robe. Both Matthew and John also describe the angels as being dressed in white. Skeptics also allege that Matthew contradicts the other Gospels in where one of the angels was sitting. The other three suggest the angels were inside the tomb, but Matthew 28:2 says one angel sat on a stone outside of the tomb. However, Matthew might also imply the angel moved and that time had passed from when the stone had rolled away to when the women arrived. He also says the angel stated, "Come, see the place where he lay," which implies the angels moved and one was speaking from inside the empty tomb. Another objection is Luke says the angels were standing, but John and Mark say they were sitting. But the Greek word can be translated to mean appear or to be present. It does not necessarily mean to stand. Skeptics will also note what the angel says to the women is different in each of the synoptics. But within the ancient cultural context, exact wording was not necessary, and authors were expected to paraphrase and summarize to help readers better understand what was happening. Demanding exact wording is forcing our cultural context onto the ancient world. They were more concerned with passing on meaning, as that was more important in the long run. So once we move past the surface level reading of the Gospels, we can easily point out there is no real contradiction, and it is quite easy to harmonize these accounts, especially when we take into account the cultural context. Thus, this supposed contradiction can be resolved.
Well, I hope this video explained everything to you, so there's no contradiction in the gospel. So let's go back to the video.
Those contradictory. I don't see them contradictory. I see them complementary because they're written by different people telling their perspectives on it. How are they contradictory?
How did Luke miss the earthquakes and the angels? That seems like a big detail.
If he doesn't report an earthquake, that doesn't mean it didn't happen.
It doesn't mean it did.
No, but it's not a contradiction.
Well,
Like, for example, if somebody came into this, some reporter came into this room tonight and said, Frank Turek gave a presentation, that would be true. And if somebody else came into this room and said, Frank Turek spoke and so did Dr. Ben Gates, that would be true as well.
This is one thing I've noticed about people. No matter how much evidence you give them, they will still not believe in God. They will still not believe in Jesus Christ. Because it's not because there's a lack of evidence. It is because they choose to harden their heart. I hope I'm wrong about this lady. And she said she used to be a Christian, but she's no longer a Christian because there's so many contradictions in the gospel. There is no contradiction in the gospel. So I hope this lady, turn around and see the truth of Christianity, because Christianity is the true religion. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And I'll see you on the next video. Take care.